The Cowboy Who Earned Their Silence and Then Their Trust, a Western Tale. The bullet missed Jake Miller's head by 3 inches and buried itself in the wooden post behind him. He didn't flinch. His hand stayed loose at his side, fingers hovering near the worn grip of his revolver. The 6 men standing in a semicircle around him expected fear. They got stone instead. "Ha, you boys done with your greeting?" Jake asked, his voice flat as the Texas plains. The tallest one, a scarred brute named Carson, spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "We don't want your kind here, Drifter. This town's got enough trouble without another gun-for-hire stirring things up." Jake hadn't come to Redemption Creek looking for work. He'd come because a telegram had reached him in Santa Fe, 3 words scrawled in desperate handwriting. "Come help us." It was signed by Margaret Hayes, a woman he'd known 15 years ago when they were both young and the world seemed less cruel. He owed her a debt he'd never forgotten. "I'm not here to stir anything," Jake said. "Just passing through to see an old friend." Carson laughed, and the others joined in. "Margaret Hayes don't have no friends. Just people she uses up and throws away. You'll learn that soon enough." The second bullet came from Jake's right. He moved before the shooter's finger finished squeezing, his body dropping low as his own gun cleared leather. The shot went wild. Jake's didn't. The man screamed and grabbed his shoulder, his weapon falling to the dust. "Next one who tries gets it between the eyes," Jake said quietly. "Now tell me why you're really here." Carson's smile vanished. "We're here because this town belongs to Vincent Cole now. Every building, every business, every soul. Margaret's the only one still fighting him, and that makes her a problem. You help her, you become a problem too." "I've been a problem before," Jake said. The men backed away slowly, carrying their wounded companion. Carson pointed at Jake with 2 fingers. "You got until sundown tomorrow to leave. After that, Cole's going to make an example of you. And trust me, stranger, you don't want that." They disappeared into the shadows between buildings, leaving Jake alone in the street. He holstered his gun and looked around. Redemption Creek was dying. Half the storefronts were boarded up. The few people he could see watched from behind dirty windows, their faces hollow and afraid. This wasn't the town Margaret had described in her letters years ago, back when it was thriving with gold miners and cattlemen. Jake walked toward the only building still showing light, a 2-story structure with a faded sign reading Hayes General Store. The door was locked. He knocked twice. "We're closed," a woman's voice called from inside. "Margaret, it's Jake Miller." Silence. Then the sound of multiple locks being undone. The door opened a crack, and a single green eye studied him through the gap. "Jake?" The door swung wide. Margaret stood there, older but still strong, her auburn hair streaked with gray. A shotgun rested in her hands. "You actually came, you asked." She pulled him inside quickly and locked the door again. The store was dim, lit by a single oil lamp. Supplies lined the shelves, but everything looked dusty, unused. "I didn't think you'd remember me," Margaret said. "I remember everyone who saved my life," Jake replied. She'd found him half dead in a canyon 15 years ago, nursed him back to health when any sensible person would have left him for the buzzards. He'd been running from a past full of mistakes then. Looking at her now, at the fear barely hidden behind her brave face, he realized she was the one running now. "Tell me about Vincent Cole," Jake said. Margaret's expression hardened. "He showed up 6 months ago with money and promises. Bought the bank, then started buying everything else. Anyone who wouldn't sell had accidents. Fires. Poisoned wells. Stolen cattle. My husband stood up to him. Where's your husband now?" "Dead. They called it a heart attack, but I know better." Jake felt the old familiar weight settling on his shoulders, the one that came when he knew peaceful solutions were already off the table. "And you're the last one standing against him." "The only one too stubborn to run or too stupid to die," Margaret said with a bitter smile. Outside, the sound of horses echoed through the empty street. Margaret extinguished the lamp instantly. Through the window, Jake counted 8 riders, all armed, circling the building slowly like wolves around wounded prey. "They do this every night," Margaret whispered, "reminding me they're watching, reminding me I'm alone." Jake checked his revolver in the darkness. "Not anymore," he said. The riders moved on, but their message was clear. The real fight would come soon, and when it did, it would be bloody. Jake had walked into the middle of a war, one man against an empire of greed and violence, but he'd made a promise 15 years ago, standing in that canyon with death breathing down his neck. Margaret had given him a second chance at life. Now it was his turn to give her one. The storm was coming to Redemption Creek, and Jake Miller would be the one bringing it. Dawn broke over Redemption Creek with the color of old blood. Jake hadn't slept. He'd spent the night watching from Margaret's upstairs window, counting the patterns of Cole's men as they patrolled the town. They worked in shifts, 6 men always visible, which meant Cole had at least 20 guns working for him. Bad odds for one man, but Jake had faced worse. Margaret came up the stairs carrying coffee and bread. "You should eat something before you leave." "Who said I'm leaving?" "Jake, you don't understand what you're up against. Vincent Cole owns this whole territory. He's got the sheriff, the judge, even the railroad company in his pocket. One man can't fight that." Jake took the coffee. "Then it's good I'm not planning to fight fair." He'd been thinking all night, running scenarios through his head like a chess player studying a board. Cole had numbers and power, but he also had weaknesses. Every tyrant did. The key was finding them before they found you first. "Tell me everything about Cole's operation," Jake said. "Where does he keep his money? Where do his men sleep? What does he care about more than power?" Margaret sat down, her eyes searching his face. "Why are you really doing this? You don't owe me this much. You saved my life when you didn't have to. That's not a debt that gets paid off with a thank you note." She studied him for a long moment, then began talking. Vincent Cole had taken over the old mining office as his headquarters, a fortified building at the north end of town. He kept his money there, in a safe that had belonged to the mining company. His men lived in the bunkhouse behind it, 30 of them rotating through shifts. Cole himself stayed at the hotel, the nicest building still standing, with 4 bodyguards always nearby. "What about the people in town?" Jake asked. "How many would fight if they had a chance? Most are too scared." "He's broken them, but there's a few. Harry Chen runs the blacksmith shop. His son died in one of those convenient accidents. And Linda Parker lost her ranch to Cole's lawyers. She's got fire in her still. Get them to meet me tonight after dark, behind the church." Jake, even with help, were still outnumbered 5-1. Numbers don't mean much if you know where to hit. Jake stood and checked his guns. "I need you to trust me, Margaret." "Can you do that?" She nodded slowly. "I've trusted you since the day I found you bleeding in that canyon. You had a dozen reasons to give up and die, but you didn't. I saw something in you then that I see now. You're a survivor, but more than that, you're someone who doesn't let evil win." The words hit Jake harder than he expected. He'd spent 15 years trying to outrun his past, taking jobs that didn't ask questions, moving before anyone could get too close. But Margaret remembered him as something better than what he'd become. Maybe it was time to remember that version of himself, too. "I'll be back before nightfall," Jake said. "Keep your shotgun loaded and don't open the door for anyone." He left through the back entrance, moving through the alleys like a ghost. The morning sun was climbing higher, baking the dusty streets. Jake made his way to the edge of town where the old mining tunnels began. If Margaret's information was right, some of those tunnels ran directly under Cole's headquarters. The entrance was partially collapsed, hidden behind scrub brush and forgotten debris. Jake squeezed through, lighting a match to see. The tunnel stretched into darkness, shored up with rotting timber that creaked under the weight of earth above. He moved carefully, counting his steps, mapping the route in his mind. After 50 yards, the tunnel branched. Jake took the left path, following what he hoped was the direction of Cole's building. The air grew stale and thick. Twice he heard the timber groaning, threatening to collapse. But he kept moving, driven by a plan forming in his mind like a storm gathering strength. The tunnel ended at a cave-in, tons of rock blocking further progress, but Jake could hear voices above him, muffled but distinct. He was under Cole's headquarters. Perfect. He made his way back to the entrance and emerged into harsh sunlight. A voice stopped him cold. Well, well, the drifter's got curious feet. 3 of Cole's men stood blocking his path, hands resting on their guns. Jake recognized one from the night before, Carson still wearing that ugly smile. "Just exploring," Jake said casually. "Town's got interesting history." Carson moved closer. "Mr. Cole wants to meet you. Says any man who shoots one of ours and lives deserves a conversation. I'm not much for conversation. Wasn't a request drifter." The other 2 men had fanned out, boxing him in. Jake calculated the angles. He could drop Carson first, maybe the man to his left, but the third would get a shot off. In this narrow space, someone was going to die, and Jake preferred it wasn't him. "Lead the way," Jake said. They walked him through town at gunpoint. People watched from windows and doorways, their faces showing that unique mixture of pity and relief that came from watching someone else become the target. Jake memorized every face, every building, every possible escape route. The soldier in him never stopped planning. Cole's headquarters loomed ahead, a 2-story brick building that had once processed mining claims and now processed something far more valuable: control. The guards outside opened the doors without a word. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of cigar smoke and old money. Vincent Cole sat behind a massive desk, counting cash with the focused attention of a man who loved wealth more than people. He was younger than Jake expected, maybe 40, with slicked back hair and a suit too expensive for this dusty town. "Jake Miller," Cole said without looking up, "I've heard interesting things about you. Don't believe everything you hear." Cole finally met his eyes, and Jake saw intelligence there, cold and calculating. This wasn't some dumb brute who'd stumbled into power. Cole was dangerous because he was smart. "I had my people check around. You've got quite a reputation. Hired gun, soldier of fortune, ghost who appears and disappears. But here's what interests me most. You're expensive. Margaret Hayes can't afford you. So why are you here?" "Personal reasons." Cole laughed and lit a cigar. "Personal reasons get men killed in my experience. Here's what's going to happen, Jake. You're going to walk away from Redemption Creek today. I'll even give you $500 for your trouble. That's more than Margaret could ever pay you. And if I say no, then you die. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow, but soon. And it won't be quick. I'll make sure everyone in this town watches while my men take their time with you. Then they'll do the same to Margaret, and everyone will remember what happens when you stand against Vincent Cole." Jake leaned forward, his voice dropping low. "Here's what's going to happen instead. You're going to pack up your operation and leave Redemption Creek. You'll return the properties you stole and the money you extorted. And you'll do it before the week is out." The room went silent. Carson and the other men looked shocked. Then Cole started laughing, a genuine sound of amusement. "I like you, Jake. You've got stones, but you're one man with a death wish going up against 30 trained killers in the entire legal system of this territory. Those aren't odds. They're suicide." Jake stood. "I've beaten worse odds. And I've got something you don't." "What's that?" "Nothing to lose." He turned and walked toward the door. Carson moved to stop him, but Cole waved him off. "Let him go. I want everyone to see him running scared by sundown." Jake stepped outside into the brutal midday sun. His heart was pounding, but his hands were steady. He'd just declared war on the most powerful man in the territory, and there was no going back now. But he'd also learned what he needed to know. Cole was arrogant, confident in his power. That arrogance would be his downfall. Jake made his way back to Margaret's store, watching the shadows for ambushes. The streets were empty now, everyone hiding from what they knew was coming. He'd seen this before in other towns, other wars. The silence before violence, heavy and suffocating. Margaret unlocked the door quickly when he knocked. "What happened?" "I saw them take you. I met Cole. He offered me money to leave." "And?" "I told him to leave instead." Margaret's face went pale. "Jake, you've just painted a target on both of us. The target was always there. Now we just make them regret pointing their guns." He moved to the window, watching the street. "Get word to those people you mentioned. We meet tonight at the church. Tell them to bring weapons and courage. We're going to need both." As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Jake felt the familiar weight of impending battle settling over him. He'd walked away from this life, or tried to. But some men were born for war, and no matter how far they ran, war always found them again. In the distance, he could see Cole's men gathering, their numbers growing as word spread of his challenge. They thought they were preparing to crush one foolish drifter. They had no idea they were about to face a storm they couldn't stop. The church stood at the south end of town, its white paint peeling in long strips like dead skin. Jake arrived first, moving through shadows thick as oil. He'd spent the afternoon preparing, checking weapons, studying angles, running through scenarios until his mind felt sharp as broken glass. Now came the hard part, convincing scared people to become fighters. Margaret arrived at midnight with 3 others. Harry Chen was first, a stocky man with cold dark eyes and hands scarred from years at the forge. His grief was fresh enough to still burn hot. Linda Parker came next, a ranch woman whose weathered face showed 40 hard years of Texas sun. She carried a rifle like she knew how to use it. The last was Danny Walsh, barely 20, whose father had owned the saloon before Cole's men burned it down with him inside. "This everyone?" Jake asked. "Everyone willing to die," Margaret said quietly. Jake looked at them in the lamplight. 4 people against 30. If this were a card game, he'd fold. But life didn't give you the option to fold when evil held all the cards. You played the hand you had and hoped skill could beat luck. Here's the truth, Jake said. We can't win a straight fight. Cole's got too many guns, too much power. But we don't need to win a straight fight. We just need to make him bleed. Harry Chen spoke first, his voice rough as gravel. They killed my boy. Called it an accident with the horses, but I found the rope burns on his neck. Tell me how to make them pay, and I'm with you. Linda nodded. I've got nothing left to lose. My ranch is gone. My husband left when I wouldn't give up the fight. Might as well go down swinging. Danny's hands shook slightly, but his voice was steady. My father always said a man's got to stand for something, or he'll fall for anything. I'm standing with you. Jake felt something shift inside him, a sensation he hadn't experienced in years. Purpose. These people were trusting him with their lives, their hope, maybe their last chance at justice. He couldn't let them down. Cole keeps his money in a safe at his headquarters, Jake began. But that's not what we're after. Money can be replaced. What we need is to break his hold on this town, and that means breaking his men's will to fight. He laid out a map on the church floor, drawn from memory and Margaret's knowledge. There's old mining tunnels running under his building. They're unstable, but they'll get us close enough. At 4 a.m, his men change shift. That's when they're least alert. Use it how? Linda asked. We're going to make them think the whole town is rising against them. Harry, you know explosives from your mining days? Enough to be dangerous. Good. I need you to set charges in 3 locations. Jake pointed to spots on the map. The bunkhouse outhouse, the stable, and the water tower. Nothing that'll kill anyone, just loud enough to wake the dead and make them think they're under attack. While they're scrambling, what are we doing? Danny asked. Margaret and Linda, you're going to be on the rooftops here and here with rifles. You don't shoot to kill, you shoot to keep them pinned and scared. Make every shadow a threat. Danny, you're with me in the tunnels. We're going after the safe. Margaret frowned. I thought you said we're not after the money? We're not. But inside that safe is Cole's ledger. Every bribe, every stolen deed, every dirty deal he's made. We get that to the territorial governor, and Cole's legal protection disappears. Harry nodded slowly. It might work. Might get us all killed, too. That's a possibility, Jake admitted. But dying free beats living on your knees. Anyone wants to walk away? Do it now. No judgment. Nobody moved. All right, then, Jake said. We've got 4 hours to get ready. Harry, you'll need to gather your supplies quiet. Linda, Margaret, find positions with good sight lines and multiple escape routes. Danny, stay with me. I'll show you the tunnel entrance. They dispersed into the darkness, each moving to their tasks with grim determination. Jake led Danny to the collapsed mine entrance, showing him how to squeeze through. I'm scared, Danny admitted as they stood at the tunnel mouth. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. It's the ones without fear who die stupid. Jake clapped him on the shoulder. You'll do fine, kid. Just stay behind me and move when I move. They spent the next 2 hours navigating the tunnel system, Danny learning the route while Jake checked for structural weaknesses. The timber shoring was worse than he'd thought. One good explosion could bring the whole thing down. That gave him an idea, risky but potentially devastating. Back at the church, they regrouped. Harry had assembled his charges using black powder from his forge and old mining equipment. Margaret and Linda had scouted their positions and marked fallback routes. Everyone looked terrified but determined. One more thing, Jake said. When this goes sideways, because it will, you run. Don't try to be a hero. Get out of town and stay gone until the dust settles.
What about you? Margaret asked.
I'll be fine. I always am. It was a lie, but a necessary one. Someone had to make the hard choices, and Jake had been making them his whole life. One more wouldn't break him. At 3:30 in the morning, they moved into position. The town slept under a sliver moon, unaware that its fate was about to change. Jake and Danny entered the tunnels while Harry crept toward his targets. Margaret and Linda climbed to their rooftop positions, settling in with their rifles. The tunnel was darker than Jake remembered, the matchlight barely pushing back the shadows. Danny followed close, his breathing quick and nervous. They reached the spot under Cole's headquarters and Jake stopped, listening. Footsteps above, the creak of floorboards, voices muffled by earth and wood. When the explosions start, we move fast, Jake whispered. The safe is in the back office. I'll crack it while you watch the door. Anyone comes through, you shoot. Understand? Danny nodded, his face pale in the matchlight. Above them, a clock somewhere chimed 4. Shift change. Jake counted in his head, marking time until Harry's charges would blow. 30 seconds. 20. 10. The first explosion shattered the morning silence like a hammer through glass. Men shouted, boots pounded, chaos erupted. The second explosion followed 5 seconds later than the third. Above Jake's head, the building erupted with activity. "Now," he said. They scrambled up through a weak point in the tunnel ceiling, breaking through rotted floorboards into a storage room. The building shook with the sounds of panicked men running in every direction. Jake moved through the chaos like a ghost, Danny right behind him. The office door was locked. Jake kicked it open. The safe sat against the far wall, a heavy iron box that had probably cost more than most people in town earned in a year. He knelt before it, pressing his ear against the cool metal, his fingers working the dial. Outside, rifles cracked. Margaret and Linda had opened fire, their shots echoing through the streets. Men screamed orders. Confusion multiplying confusion. Jake's world narrowed to the safe, to the tiny clicks and turns that would unlock it. "Someone's coming," Danny hissed from the door. 30 more seconds. We don't have 30 seconds. Jake's fingers flew faster. Click. Turn. Click. The safe's mechanism was old but well maintained. 15 seconds. The footsteps in the hall grew louder. Click. Jake grabbed the ledger, a thick book bound in leather, and shoved it inside his coat. "Go! Back to the tunnel." They ran. Behind them, the office door burst open and someone shouted. A bullet whined past Jake's ear and buried itself in the wall. He fired back without looking, emptying his revolver into the doorway. The shooting stopped, replaced by cursing. Down through the storage room floor, back into the tunnel. Danny moved fast now, fear giving him speed. Jake followed, stopping only to light a match against the tunnel's support beam. "What are you doing?" Danny called back. Jake smiled grimly and tossed the match onto a trail of black powder Harry had laid earlier, a contingency plan Jake had insisted on, making sure they don't follow. The powder caught, racing along the tunnel floor like a living thing. Jake ran, the fire chasing him, Danny already ahead, scrambling toward the exit. Behind them, the charges Harry had hidden in the tunnel supports began to detonate in sequence. The earth roared, timber cracked like bones breaking. Jake dove for the exit as the tunnel collapsed behind him, tons of rock and dirt filling the passage, sealing it forever. He rolled into the open air, coughing dust and smoke, Danny dragging him away from the entrance. "Are you crazy?" Danny shouted. "Probably," Jake admitted, checking that the ledger was still secure, "but they can't chase us through a collapsed tunnel." Behind them, dawn was breaking over Redemption Creek, and in that early light, Jake could see Vincent Cole's empire beginning to crumble. The ledger in his coat was the key to everything, evidence of crimes that couldn't be hidden or explained away. But the fight was far from over. Cole still had his men, his guns, his willingness to do whatever it took to hold power. And now Jake had made him desperate. Desperate men were the most dangerous kind. The explosion had done more than collapse the tunnel. It had torn a crater in the middle of Cole's headquarters, dropping half the building into the earth like God himself had reached down and taken a bite. Jake watched from a rooftop 3 blocks away as men scrambled around the destruction, their perfect order shattered into chaos. "We hurt them," Danny said, crouched beside him.
"We embarrassed them," Jake corrected. "That's worse."
"Cole won't stop until he's made an example of us." The ledger felt heavy inside Jake's coat, heavier than leather and paper should. Each page documented another crime, another life ruined, another piece of a town stolen through intimidation and murder. Names, dates, amounts paid to corrupt officials. It was enough to hang Vincent Cole 10 times over if they could get it to someone who mattered. Margaret and Linda had made it off their rooftops and were heading to the rendezvous point, the abandoned tannery at the edge of town. Harry was supposed to meet them there after setting his charges. Jake and Danny made their way across rooftops, using the dawn shadows for cover. A shot rang out, close enough that Jake felt the air split beside his head. He dropped flat, pulling Danny down with him. Below in the street, he saw Carson and 5 others, rifles raised. "Nowhere to run now, Drifter," Carson shouted up. "Mr. Cole wants his property back. Toss down that ledger and maybe he'll let you die quick." Jake looked at Danny. The kid was terrified but holding his rifle steady. "Can you shoot? My father taught me." "Good. On 3, we light them up and run for the next building." 1, 2. On 3, they both fired. Danny's shot hit close enough to make one man dive for cover. Jake's took down the man furthest left. They scrambled across the roof and jumped the gap to the next building. Bullets chased them, punching holes through old wood and tile. They made 3 more rooftops before dropping into an alley. Jake's lungs burned and his leg throbbed where he'd landed wrong, but they were alive. That counted for something. The tannery came into view, its windows dark and empty. Jake approached cautiously, gun drawn. A soft whistle from inside. Margaret's signal. He relaxed slightly and entered. Everyone was there except Harry. Margaret, Linda, and Danny, all breathing hard but uninjured. They looked at Jake with a mixture of relief and fear. "Did you get it?" Margaret asked. Jake pulled out the ledger and dropped it on a workbench. Every dirty secret Cole's got. Linda flipped through the pages, her expression hardening with each entry. "This is enough to put him away for life. Maybe get some of our property back, too." "If we can get it to the governor," Jake said. "Cole's going to burn this town to the ground before he lets this get out. Then we send it now," Margaret said. "The morning stage leaves in 30 minutes. We could." The door exploded inward. Men poured through, guns raised. Jake counted 8, too many to fight in this enclosed space. He raised his hands slowly, the others following his lead. Vincent Cole walked in last, immaculate despite the early hour, his suit pressed and his hair perfect. But his eyes were wild, the careful control shattered. This was a man on the edge of losing everything. "That was quite impressive," Cole said, his voice tight. "The explosions, the tunnel, stealing my ledger. I underestimated you, Jake. I won't make that mistake again." "It's over, Cole. Your empire's built on paper, and that paper's going to burn you." Cole laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You still don't understand. I own the sheriff, the judge, the territorial officials. That ledger means nothing without someone willing to act on it. And anyone who tries will have an unfortunate accident before they can talk." He crossed to the workbench and picked up the ledger, flipping through it almost casually. "All this effort for nothing. You could have taken my money and left. Now you get to watch everyone you care about die." Jake's mind raced through options. 8 guns against 4 people with their weapons confiscated. The math was simple and deadly, but he'd been in worse situations. He just needed an opening, one chance. "There's a problem with your plan," Jake said. "What's that? You're assuming that's the only copy?" Cole's expression flickered. "You're bluffing. Maybe. Or maybe I spent last night making copies while you slept in your expensive hotel bed. Maybe one's already on its way to the governor. Maybe 3 are. How sure are you?" It was a complete lie, but Cole didn't know that. Jake watched the calculation happening behind those cold eyes. Kill them now and risk the ledger's contents getting out, or keep them alive until he was certain. "Search them," Cole ordered. "Search this whole building. If there are copies, I want them found." As his men moved to obey, Jake caught Margaret's eye and gave the slightest nod toward the back window. She understood. When the moment came, they'd move. But the moment didn't come. Cole's men were professionals, searching methodically, blocking every exit. Jake was starting to accept that this might be where his story ended when he heard it. A low rumble. Growing louder. Hoofbeats. Dozens of them. Cole heard it too. He moved to the window and his face went pale. "What did you do?" Jake had no idea what was happening, but he wasn't about to admit it.
He smiled instead.
"I told you. I've beaten worse odds." The riders surrounded the tannery, 20 men on horseback, all armed. But these weren't Cole's men. Jake recognized them from wanted posters and rumors. Outlaws, gunslingers, the kind of men who lived outside the law. The leader dismounted and walked to the door. He was tall and grizzled, with a scar running from his eye to his jaw. Jake knew him. Luther Kane, a man Jake had ridden with 10 years ago in a war that felt like another lifetime. "Jake Miller," Luther said, his voice like grinding stone. "Heard you might need a hand." "Luther, how'd you know where to find me?" "Harry Chen got word to me before Cole's men grabbed him. Said you were fighting a war against a corrupt landowner and could use some backup." Luther's smile was predatory. "Never could resist a good fight." Cole's men had their guns out, but the math had changed dramatically. 8 against 20 were terrible odds, even for hardened killers. "This is my town," Cole said, trying to sound confident. "You're outlaws. The law will hunt you down." Luther laughed. "The law's been hunting us for years. One more charge won't matter. But you're going to drop that ledger and walk away, or we're going to paint this building with your blood." The standoff held for 3 heartbeats. Then Carson, always the survivor, lowered his gun. The others followed. They weren't loyal enough to die for Cole's pride. Cole's face twisted with rage, but he was beaten and knew it. He dropped the ledger on the floor and backed toward the door. "This isn't over, Miller. I'll hunt you to the ends of the earth." "You're welcome to try," Jake said, "but you might want to start running." That ledger's going to the governor today, and I expect federal marshals will be very interested in talking to you." Cole fled, his men following. The sounds of horses faded as they rode out of town, leaving only dust and the memory of their tyranny. Luther handed Jake his gun back. "You always did know how to pick interesting fights." "Where's Harry?" Jake asked. Luther's expression darkened. "Cole's men caught him setting charges. Beat him pretty bad. He's alive, but he's hurt." "Got him to the doctor before we came here?" Jake felt anger surge through him, hot and fierce. Harry had risked everything, and Cole's men had made him pay for it. "I want Cole found, him and everyone who rode with him." "Already got men tracking them," Luther said. "But Jake, you need to understand something. This ledger's going to shake up a lot of powerful people. You're going to make enemies bigger than Cole." "I've got enemies already." "Few more won't matter." Margaret picked up the ledger, holding it like it was made of gold. "This gives us our town back. Whatever comes after, it was worth it." Danny and Linda nodded agreement. These people had faced death and come through it, and in doing so, they'd found something more valuable than safety. They'd found the strength to stand against evil, no matter the cost. Jake looked at Luther. "Stay for breakfast?" "Margaret makes the best biscuits in the territory." "Wouldn't miss it. Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't get yourself killed in the next hour." They walked back toward Margaret's store through streets that were slowly coming alive. People emerged from their homes, seeing Cole's men gone, seeing Jake and his unlikely army of rebels and outlaws. Word spread fast in small towns. By noon, everyone would know that Vincent Cole's empire had fallen, brought down by a handful of people who refused to accept tyranny as inevitable. The sun climbed higher, burning away the morning shadows. Jake felt the weight of the night lifting from his shoulders. They'd won, not through overwhelming force, but through courage and determination and a willingness to risk everything for what was right. In Margaret's store, with coffee brewing and the smell of biscuits filling the air, Jake allowed himself a moment of peace. These people had become more than allies in a fight. They'd become friends, maybe even family. Luther was already swapping war stories with Danny, while Margaret and Linda planned how to rebuild the town with Cole's stolen properties returned. But Jake knew this peace wouldn't last. It never did. There were still loose ends, still dangers lurking in the shadows. Cole was out there somewhere, and men like him didn't give up easily. The ledger would expose corruption that reached high into the territorial government, and those powerful men wouldn't go quietly. The war for Redemption Creek was over, but Jake suspected a bigger war was just beginning, and this time he wasn't running from it. This time, he was ready to see it through to the end, no matter where that end led. 3 days later, Jake stood on the platform as the morning train pulled into Redemption Creek Station, steam hissing and brakes squealing against iron rails. He carried the ledger in a locked case, chained to his wrist. Margaret stood beside him along with Linda and a recovering Harry Chen, his face still bruised but his eyes fierce. Luther Kane and his men had stayed to ensure no one interfered with this moment. The train doors opened and 2 men in suits stepped out, federal marshals with badges gleaming in the sunlight. Behind them came someone Jake hadn't expected, Governor Richard Hayes himself, a silver-haired man whose reputation for integrity was the only reason Jake trusted him with the evidence. "Mr. Miller," the governor said, shaking his hand. "Your telegram made serious allegations. I hope you have proof to back them up." Jake unlocked the case and handed over the ledger. The governor flipped through it, his expression growing darker with each page. One of the marshals looked over his shoulder and whistled low. "This implicates half the territorial government," the marshal said. "Judges, sheriffs, land office officials. If this is authentic—" "It's authentic," Margaret interrupted. "Every word. Vincent Cole documented his crimes like a businessman keeps receipts. His arrogance is your evidence." The governor closed the ledger carefully. "This will cause an earthquake, do you understand? Trials, investigations, probably a complete restructuring of territorial governance." "Good," Harry said, his voice rough from injuries. "This territory needs cleaning. Too many good people have suffered while corrupt men got rich." "Where's Cole now?" the other marshal asked. Luther Kane stepped forward, and both marshals stiffened at recognizing the notorious outlaw. "My men tracked him to the border. He's trying to run to Mexico. I can have him for you by tomorrow if you want him alive." The governor looked at Luther with a mixture of wariness and pragmatism. "You understand I can't officially sanction outlaws acting as law enforcement?" "Don't need your sanction," Luther said with a grim smile. "Just saying Cole won't get far. Whether he's brought back for trial or dies trying to escape, that's up to him. One of the marshals moved toward Luther with handcuffs ready, but the governor stopped him with a raised hand. Let's deal with one problem at a time. Mr. Kane, I'd appreciate it if you made yourself scarce for the next few days. After that, we'll discuss any outstanding warrants. It was as close to amnesty as an outlaw could expect. Luther tipped his hat and backed away, his men following. The governor turned to Jake. I'll need you to come to the Capitol and testify. This ledger is damning, but personal testimony from witnesses will seal the cases against these men. I'll come, Jake said, but I want guarantees. The people of this town get their property back. Every deed Cole stole, every dollar he extorted, it goes back to the rightful owners. You have my word. It took 6 weeks. 6 weeks of trials, testimonies, and political earthquakes that shook the territorial government to its foundations. Jake spent most of that time in the Capitol telling his story over and over to judges, lawyers, and politicians. Margaret came with him, her testimony about her husband's murder breaking through the bureaucratic coldness that often protected the powerful. 17 officials were arrested. 8 judges were removed from the bench. The territorial sheriff was sentenced to 20 years in prison. And Vincent Cole, captured by Luther's men trying to cross into Mexico with bags of stolen money, faced a jury of people he'd terrorized. The verdict came back in less than an hour. Guilty on all counts. Cole would spend the rest of his life in prison, his empire of corruption dismantled brick by brick. Jake was there when they led Cole away in chains. The man who'd once seemed untouchable now looked small and broken, his expensive suit rumpled and his perfect hair disheveled. Their eyes met for a moment, and Jake saw not defiance, but disbelief. Cole had never imagined that ordinary people could bring him down. You destroyed me, Cole said as the guards pulled him past. No, Jake replied quietly. You destroyed yourself. I just made sure everyone could see it. Back in Redemption Creek, the town was being reborn. Margaret's general store thrived with returning customers. Linda reclaimed her ranch and was already building her herd back up. Harry's blacksmith shop rang with the sound of honest work. Danny Walsh, emboldened by his role in the fight, had started rebuilding his father's saloon, determined to make it better than before. The town council, cleared of Cole's corruption, offered Jake the job of sheriff. He turned it down. He wasn't meant for badges and authority, but he stayed in Redemption Creek, buying a small ranch on the edge of town where he could see the sunset paint the mountains gold. Luther Kane visited once before disappearing back into the wilderness. You went soft on me, Jake, he said with a grin. Settling down, becoming respectable. There's different kinds of fights, Jake said. Some need guns, some need courage. Maybe I'm just tired of the first kind. You earned your rest. But if you ever need a hand again, send word. I owe you for getting the governor to look the other way on those warrants. They shook hands, 2 old warriors who'd seen too much violence but still believed in something worth fighting for. On a cool evening in October, 6 months after the fight began, Jake sat on his porch watching the sun disappear behind the mountains. Margaret rode up on horseback carrying a basket. Brought you dinner, she said, dismounting. Figured you were eating nothing but beans and hardtack out here. You figured right. They sat together in comfortable silence, eating fried chicken and biscuits while the sky turned from gold to purple to deep blue. The town below showed lights in almost every window now, life returning to a place that had nearly died. You know what I think? Margaret said finally. I think you came here planning to die. One last fight for a lost cause, going out like a gunfighter in some sad song. Jake didn't deny it. She wasn't wrong. But something changed, she continued. Maybe it was seeing that people still had fight in them. Maybe it was remembering that you're not just a killer. You're a man who stands up for what's right. Whatever it was, you chose to live instead of die, and that made all the difference. I'm still trying to figure out how to live, Jake admitted. It's been so many years running, I forgot what it's like to stay. Then stay. Build something. Be part of this town you saved. He looked at her, this woman who'd saved his life twice now, once with medicine and once with purpose. What if more trouble comes? Men like Cole, they're not unique. There's always another tyrant waiting. Then we'll face it together. That's what communities do, and you're part of this community now, whether you admit it or not. Stars began appearing in the darkening sky, small points of light pushing back the darkness. Jake thought about the people he'd fought beside, the courage they'd shown when they had every reason to surrender. They'd earned their silence from Cole's men through strength, and earned their trust through sacrifice. All right, Jake said. I'll stay. Margaret smiled. Good. 'Cause the town council wants you to train a proper militia. Volunteers who can defend the town if trouble comes again. They're willing to pay a decent wage. I'm not a sheriff. No, you're better. You're a man who knows how to fight and knows when fighting is necessary. That's worth more than any badge. Over the next months, Jake trained 20 men and women in defensive tactics, marksmanship, and the kind of strategic thinking that had kept him alive through countless battles. He taught them not to seek violence, but to be ready when violence found them. Redemption Creek would never be defenseless again. Word spread through the territory about what had happened in the town, how ordinary people had stood against corruption and won. Other towns started asking questions, demanding accountability from their own officials. The earthquake the governor had predicted continued to reshape the political landscape. Jake's reputation evolved too. No longer just a hired gun or a killer for hire, he became known as the man who'd helped a town find its courage. Young men showed up at his ranch asking to learn from him, not how to kill but how to stand up for what was right. He sent most away, keeping only those who showed genuine moral character. 1 year after the fight, on the anniversary of the day Cole's empire fell, the town held a celebration. There was music, dancing, food, and laughter. Jake stood at the edge of the festivities, watching people who'd been broken and afraid now living without fear. Harry Chen found him there, moving easier now, though he'd always carry a limp from his beating. "You should be down there celebrating. You're the hero of this story." "I'm no hero, just a man who did what needed doing." "That's exactly what a hero is," Harry said. "Someone who does what needs doing when no one else will." Jake watched Danny Walsh dancing with a local girl, Linda Parker laughing with merchants whose businesses had been restored, Margaret organizing games for children who no longer had to grow up afraid. This was what winning looked like. Not bodies and gun smoke, but life continuing, people thriving. "You think Cole ever wonders if it was worth it?" Harry asked. "All that power, all that money, and he's locked in a cell for the rest of his life. Men like Cole don't wonder. They justify. They tell themselves they deserved what they took, that might makes right, that ordinary people are sheep meant to be sheared." Jake turned to look at Harry. "That's why people like us matter. We remind them that sheep have teeth." Harry laughed. "Sheep with teeth. I like that." As night fell and the celebration continued, Jake slipped away to his ranch. He'd never been comfortable with attention or praise. The work was what mattered, not the glory. But before he could leave town, Margaret caught up with him. "Running away from your own party? Just need some quiet." She linked her arm through his. "Walk me home first?" They strolled through the transformed town, past the rebuilt structures and thriving businesses. At her door, Margaret turned to face him. "I never properly thanked you for coming when I called. You gave up your peace to save this town. I owed you a debt. The debt was paid 100 times over." She reached up and touched his face gently. "You gave us more than freedom from Cole. You gave us back our courage, our belief that good people can win against evil. That's a gift that'll last generations." Jake didn't know what to say to that. He'd spent so long being a weapon, being the solution to problems that required violence, that being seen as something better felt strange and uncomfortable. "Get some rest," Margaret said. "Tomorrow the council wants to discuss expanding the militia training to other towns. Your quiet retirement might have to wait." "I never expected retirement to be quiet," Jake admitted. He walked back to his ranch under a sky full of stars, the sounds of celebration fading behind him. The land rolled out in all directions, free from Cole's shadow, alive with possibility. Somewhere out there, other tyrants plotted their schemes. Other towns suffered under corrupt rule. But tonight, Redemption Creek was free. And Jake Miller, the cowboy who'd earned their silence through strength and their trust through sacrifice, had finally found something worth more than any fight. He'd found a home.